Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the next sessions on day 3 of the Wales Biodiversity Partnership Conference of 2020. So this morning we have some sessions on connecting communities to nature, about building capacity in the community, and those will continue until almost 3 o'clock this afternoon. So lots to talk about in these sessions. Just a bit of housekeeping before we start. You can ask questions to any of our speakers through the live chat. That'll be picked up and we will put those to the speakers at the end of the 3 talks that we have now. You're welcome to ask any questions in Welsh, as these will be translated, although unless our speakers are Welsh speaking, the answer will be in English, just to note. Further details of all the presentations and the speakers' biographies can be found on our Hoover webpage, so we won't spend too much time now going through those, but please feel free to check those over. And just to note that all of these sessions are being recorded and will be available afterwards through the WBP website. So without further ado then, I will hand over to our first speaker, who is Alison from the RSPB Living Levels Landscape Partnership. So over to you, Alison. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Karen. Yes, so I'm Alison Boys, Programme Manager for Living Levels. I'm pleased to have you here in my study to talk about our work. It's a very strange situation, but I don't have a lot of time, so I'm going to dive straight in. I'm just going to briefly set out how I intend to structure this talk. And so I'm going to give you some brief background and overview of the landscape and the challenges that we're facing here before moving on to talk about some of the solutions that we're implementing and how they're working. It won't offer up a panacea, as some of the issues that we are dealing with in the landscape are extremely complex and also long-term, and in many ways they're bigger than the institutions and the partnership that we have built. However, we're building a really solid foundation for future action in the landscape, and I'm keen to share some of our experiences with you today. I do find it very difficult squeezing in our huge programme into a 20-minute slot. I feel like I could talk for 20 minutes on any one of our 24 individual projects, but I will do my very best. So we are the Living Levels, which is a National Lottery Heritage Fund Landscape Partnership Scheme, a bit of a mouthful. So we're primarily funded by the Heritage Lottery, but we are also funded by others, including our partners. We've secured just under £4 million in funding for what is now a 4.5-year scheme, and we've had an extension to mitigate for the impact of COVID-19. So we started in February 2017, and we will end now in March 2022. So we are approaching the final third of our scheme, if I've done my maths right. I just wanted to give a tiny bit of background about the Landscape Partnership Scheme itself, as that's the underpinning framework that we hang our project off. So this funding is usually for a large area at a landscape scale, as the name suggests, and it's primarily targeted at protecting local heritage. It's often been the case, if you look around the UK at other landscape partnership schemes, that the fund has primarily targeted landscapes which are in some ways marginalised or degraded and are facing particularly tough challenges, which can only be overcome with the concerted effort of a broad range of partners working together for the long term to enact a vision. And that is very much the case for our landscape partnership, which is focused on the Gwent Levels in South East Wales. So delivering this partnership, we are 12 core partners led by RSPB Cymru, who employ me and my team of 7 other dedicated officers. I should have put a photo of them here. They're a brilliant team, fantastic, dedicated, talented officers who actually deliver most of the work. I'm afraid I don't have a photo, but there's a lovely photo of them on our website, so I encourage you to go and have a look at that, and you can see then what else they do. In reality, and it's a cliche to say it, but it is very true, there are a much greater number of informal partners, stakeholders and volunteers involved in delivering our scheme and contributing to it, and it really is crucial that they do get involved, because our success depends on a large participation. So let's focus in on the Gwent Levels. Here we are. This slide shows you where we are, some of our key sites. We roughly cover a 20-mile stretch from the River Rymney in Cardiff, across the face of the Severn Estuary and over to Chepstow. For anybody not familiar with the Gwent Levels, they are those lands which have been reclaimed from the sea over thousands of years. Picture to represent what they might have looked like in prehistoric times. They've been exploited by man since Mesolithic times, when nomadic tribes used to hunt the area and fish along the foreshore's edge during the drier summer months. In that period, the Gwent Levels was a wild wetland of salt marsh, muddy peat bogs and woodland, and this picture is a historical illustration we commissioned as part of a project to help people visualise some of the lost landscapes of the Gwent Levels. It's part of a bigger interpretation strategy, which I've barely got any time to talk about, but I wanted to use some of these lovely images as I talk to you very, very briefly about the history of the area. So the Romans were the first to build sea defences and drain the land, but their flood defences ultimately failed and the landscape was flooded again. So today's landscape is largely medieval in date. It was the monks of Tintern Abbey and Goldcliff Priory who made the first long-lasting attempt to tame the levels, and today's landscape is largely medieval in date. So today the levels are primarily in agricultural use, but they retain many of the ancient features, including green-fringed fields, small settlements and roadways, which would be familiar to the Benedictine monks of those Norman times. Much of the Gwent Levels is below. Here's a picture of Gwent Levels today. Much of the land is below sea level, and were it not for the robust sea defences and a sophisticated inland drainage system to manage the fresh water running off the landscapes, the landscape would periodically be flooded by the high tides of the Severn Estuary, and this is a depiction of the Great Flood of 1607, but many subsequent floods remind us of that constant tension in the landscape between land and sea. I felt it was important to give a little tiny bit of history, because it really is the combination of local people managing a dynamic landscape through systems which have developed over thousands of years, which makes the heritage here so rare, so special, and such a rich resource that we need to protect and preserve for future generations. The levels are home to over 1,600 kilometres of handcrafted field ditches and reams, which together with the extensive shoreline make the levels a real biodiversity hotspot. Much of the area is designated as SSSI. There are 8 SSSIs across the levels, and they contain many rarities, particularly submerged plants and pond weeds, such as the world's smallest flowering vascular plant, Wolfia oryza. Some of the examples are pictured here, and the assemblage of water beetles is unique in Wales. The levels are also a stronghold for the rare shrill carder bee, which is a qualifying feature of the 8 SSSIs. It's a pretty special place. We're making a wonderful video at the moment to showcasing these attributes, which will be released before Christmas, but I don't have time unfortunately to show you a sneak preview today. I wanted to also talk briefly about some of the key threats and pressures. As I alluded to earlier, landscape partnerships tend to be focused on in degraded landscapes, and whilst the Levels is truly wonderful in terms of its heritage, it's also facing some fairly major challenges. So I'll turn quickly to those, as they will help to contextualise the responses and solutions the partnerships are putting in place to combat these. So one of the key pressures is driven by its geography, located as it is on a major transport corridor for South Wales. Development pressure in the Levels has really accelerated in the last 50 years, and we're talking everything from transport infrastructure to industry, housing, and lately also renewable energy generation. There are many competing pressures in the same place, and combined these pressures have created real anxiety for local people living there, as well as putting enormous pressure on the natural resources and the historic landscape character. It's important to say the partnership is not for or against any individual development in the landscape and can't pronounce on individual issues, but collectively we acknowledge that the cumulative pressure from all of these is really putting unacceptable pressure on the landscape, and this is a major enjeu for the future. Another major pressure comes from intense agricultural intensification, which has had a profound impact on the character of the Levels in the last 50 years as well. Large areas have been converted to arable, and intensive dairy farming has had major impacts on water quality and biodiversity losses. A particular issue for the Levels is the management of field ditches, the majority of which are on privately owned land, and while it is technically the landowner's responsibility to maintain those field boundaries, in reality today that hasn't been happening to the extent needed, and as a result of that, 63% of the field ditches across the Gwent Levels and the SSSIs have become overgrown, heavily shaded, threatening the aquatic plant and invertebrate interest that the levels is designated for, and why, which are so important to preserve. So large parts of that SSSI are in failing condition. There's a real sense among local people, particularly older generations, it has to be said, that there's been a loss, an erosion of knowledge and skills in the landscape, particularly around the landscape special features and its habitat management. These local issues are being compounded by some more generalised societal trends, particularly in urban areas, which butt up to the Gwent levels with Newport and Cardiff, with people becoming increasingly disconnected from nature and their surrounding environment, leading to bigger urban rural divides and having major consequences on our health and well-being. So that's really the key drivers that brought our partners together, and it's very much the ambition of these partners to work together to capitalise on the funding that we've got for the Gwent levels, and also some of the more positive policy opportunities and societal shifts that are happening currently in Wales, so that we can create a step change in the way the landscape is valued, appreciated and protected for future generations. That's our major raison d'etre and our overall aims. So that's the background, why we're here, and now I want to turn to how we are helping to bring about some of that change, what we've achieved to date and what we're hoping our legacy will be. Obviously, this being Biodiversity Conference and the public engagement session, that's where I'm going to turn, even though our programme of work is much larger and covers everything from visitor infrastructure and destination management to community engagement in a much broader sense. So onto the projects. The first thing I just want to talk about briefly is what we've been doing to improve the SSSI condition. As we had this big chunk of money, we had a one-off opportunity to invest in a large-scale effort to improve the habitat there. So we gave the landscape a big and immediate boost by putting aside a major budget to restore 21 kilometres of the most degraded field ditches in the worst condition, i.e. the ones that become the most dry and the most overgrown. So we set about the task of delivering this work package alongside local landowners who've all signed 10-year maintenance and management agreements as a condition of the funding. And here are some of the photos of the clearance works before and after. And so you can see a very different landscape, looking much better. And I'm pleased to say that also we've had the return of a lot of the aquatic vegetation and life which had been lost. That's really, really good to see. However, we do know that we cannot expect landowners to deliver public good type measures which cost them money and produce no profit without compensation. So another important project for us is focused on future agri-environment policy to try and make it better tailored to local environment and fully represent the cost of delivering for biodiversity. To date, these agri-environment schemes in the Gwent levels have had really poor take-up and success, and not much success. So this is a really important piece of our legacy work, and it's an area where RSPB is really focused. In fact, we have a whole other Welsh Government funded SMS project which is entirely looking at that, and I think John Cryer from RSPB is actually speaking about that work, so I won't say too much more about it. There are still quite a lot of uncertainties with that work as it's linked to the post-Brexit farm policy which is ongoing. However, as I said, it's a major important legacy piece of the puzzle there. I just wanted to say a small note on our public engagement throughout the habitat restoration work, because this has been really, really, really important. As you can probably imagine, the kind of work that we've been doing has the potential to be quite negatively received. In other landscapes, taking away scrub or hedgerow actually could be perceived quite negatively and be seen as very destructive. Obviously, in the Gwent levels, the special interest is those aquatic plant assemblages and the watercourses. So we've had to be very careful in explaining what we're doing and why we're doing it to the public, because it can look very shocking when you're doing this kind of work. At first, we did have some negative feedback, but since we've put in place a major PR strategy, I'm pleased to say that has now reduced, and generally speaking, we've got people on board. So we've used a real variety of mediums. We've got a newsletter, we've got the website, which is a really good source of content on the Gwent levels now. We use social media, we've used mixed media as well, video, photographs. We've had really, really good press interest. So I think that has been enormously important, almost as important as the habitat restoration network itself, getting people on board and supporting what we're doing. Another important aspect of our work for the long term and for the legacy has been working to upskill the local contractors. I mentioned earlier about the loss of skills and how we're trying to make our actions sustainable. So another pillar of the Living Levels project has therefore been training, both professional training and certification, and more informal training in habitat management and rural skills, for landowners and for volunteers. So early on in the project, we realised that there was a lack of local contractors with the correct qualifications to be able to carry out large-scale habitat restoration works. So we arranged for 12 local contractors to get their CPCS cards, which is basically a health and safety qualification. It enables them to safely use a 10-ton excavator and cable and be able to do cable avoidance, and that's a really important legacy because it's created a skilled workforce of local contractors who can bid for much bigger projects now in the future, helping boost their economic potential as well. So that's a really important and positive legacy that we've left behind. I wanted to talk a bit more detail now about our public engagement strategy and our community engagement. And one of the things that I wanted to stress was how we are trying to work intergenerationally across a huge range of ages because that's really important for our impact. So we've started with the very youngest people who we want to become our future influencers. So one of our really important projects with this age group has been the creation of a Levels learning resource for use with primary age children. The resource is packed with activities for teachers and learning activity leaders, showing them how to make use of their local environment. It's strongly linked to the curriculum key topics and activities. As when we were doing a research phase, we were told by teachers this would be vital to actually make sure that they use the resource. Another important part in the delivery of this project was that we organised some teacher training days where we got teachers down to actually carry out the activities from the resource themselves, which they fed back as being really important because it gave them the confidence to be able to deliver the activities with their classes. We wanted to do that this year as well to reinforce that, but unfortunately because of COVID we've had to put that back a year as schools are currently very, very focused on their on the COVID crisis, and it's been very difficult to do that. However, we will reinforce that training, and part of our extension has been making sure that these projects can carry on. So yes, as I said earlier, we want to make sure that we want to work with these younger age groups. We know that early education has a huge bearing on future attitudes, but also young people can influence upwards through their households by talking to other members, siblings, parents, grandparents, and we've actually seen the results of that with engagement of our face-to-face events. We've had families, with the different generations involved. So that's really, really good, helping us to grow our impact across different audiences. So really, really positive to see. And this is just an example of one of the videos. So it's not just a paper resource, but we're using lots of different resources. So physical, video, and of course the actual learning resource itself. That's available on our website. So we've also been attempting to harness the power of young people by working with students at the local Coleg Gwent. So not just those studying in ecology, and in fact, we have focused on art students who have no natural links with biodiversity work, biodiversity topics and ecology, and that's been really wonderful. As it's really helped us to take our messages. They've really helped us to take our messages to their peers through a series of photography, art, and drama projects. So we've worked with tutors of those different subjects to embed the Gwent levels as a study subject for the students. And that has given them real life work experience and provided us with a platform to talk to what can be quite a difficult age bracket to engage, the 18 to 24 group. The results have been really, really positive. We've delivered a series of public exhibitions for their work. Prior to COVID, these were real life, but we've now moved them to a series of online galleries. They've designed logos, posters for us that we've used at our events, and they've also helped us with various different campaigns, including an awareness-raising campaign against invasive non-native species in the levels. So that's been absolutely incredible. And the feedback that we've had from them has been so encouraging for us. They've said things like they had no idea they lived in such a special place, that this place was on their doorstep. They are extremely proud to live here. The project has inspired them to take an active interest in their local area, and similar things. And this is exactly the kind of energy and enthusiasm that we need if we want to create ambassadors for these kind of landscapes. So we feel this has been particularly valuable. And it's a great legacy that tutors of Coleg Gwent want to keep this activity going beyond the end of our funding, which won't last forever. So that's another fantastic piece of a legacy puzzle. I also wanted to just briefly touch on one of our citizen science projects, of which there are actually several, but I haven't got time to talk about them all. So this was our Wild Watch project.
A couple of minutes then, Alison, thank you.
Okie dokie, a couple of minutes, right. Right, what to say? Okay, so so this is training people to become wildlife recorders of 12 key indicator species for the levels. So we've trained them with field recording days and use of the LERC app. So we're really hoping that you can help contribute to some of the paucity of data, which is another ongoing problem. I wanted to touch a little bit on some of our more experimental methods. We've worked with Tinshed Theatre Company, who are really specialists in helping us to reach more of the hard-to-reach audiences. So they've developed some really quite weird and wonderful theatrical characters, and you can see some of them pictured here. Mr. Blossoms, who was a character that helped people understand the process of pollination. There's a bellboy taking people into a bug hotel there. This was really about creating a buzz around what we're doing. We had amazing engagement on social media and lots of press and media coverage. So that kind of project, which is a little bit outside of what we normally do, especially for organisations like the RSPB, has been really, really good, and again helped widen the impact of the project. So obviously COVID has had a massive impact on what we've been able to deliver. We've had to stop a lot of our face-to-face engagement in the last few months. That's forced us online, but that hasn't been an entirely negative thing. We've actually managed to reach many more global audiences. We've had Aboriginal Australians joining our creative writing group, as well as people from Texas, and genuinely, it's not an exaggeration to say that has enabled us to go global and beyond. Hopefully the end of COVID-19, we would probably continue in some form with that blended delivery. So that it's not all been bad. I was going to play a video at this point, but I'm not sure there's going to be time. I want to say one more really important point, which is about engagement with our decision makers, because that's something which I think has been super important for us. We've worked across different target groups, from grassroots to high level decision makers. And at the very beginning of the project, we organised bus tours with assembly members, members of parliament, community councils, councillors, and although actually we didn't have brilliant attendance, we did have the attendance of some really big names who have now worked with us to do a lot of promotion and started a lot of initiatives. And some of those high level problems that I alluded to earlier that we can't necessarily solve at the partnership level, they've started to be taken up to a high level, and there's a creation of a Welsh Government group chaired by John Griffiths that's looking into those. So that is an element of...
I'm sorry to interrupt you.
That is it. Yeah, I am done. I just wanted to end on that notion of hope, that we are building a really solid foundation for levels. We haven't, we're starting to win the battle of hearts and minds. We haven't won them all yet, but yeah, we're getting there, and it's a huge program. I've only been able to touch on it in a tiny bit of detail, but hopefully given you a flavour. And yeah, I'm willing to take any questions. Sorry if I've taken too long. It's very hard to do it in 20 minutes.
Thanks. Thank you very much, Alison. What we're going to do is have all of the speakers and then the questions at the end. And thank you for that presentation. There is a lot of information, but we do have a lot to get through today. So I'm sure people can contact you or find out more about you on your own websites and follow up afterwards. But we'll come back to questions a little bit later.